Welcome everyone to the first of the series of webinars that we do every year. This is actually our fourth year for offering live technical webinars with Motor Age and TST. I'm Pete Meier, technical editor for Motor Age magazine, and this is my cohort.
I forgot my name. No, I'm G. Truglia, president of TST.
And if you would be so kind as to bump us up one there, partner. I want to take a moment to thank MotoLogic for sponsoring today's event. MotoLogic is actually part of the Moto Shop suite of technology tools available from Advanced Auto Parts. If you want more information, go to motoshop.com, or for those of you who are here at Vision, take some time out to the trade show to see those lovely folks there in the back from Advanced, and they'll tell you all about what they have to offer. Thanks so much to the folks from Advanced for sponsoring today's event and all the goodies that they gave you for there on the table. So thank you very much for you folks.
By the way, it's a very good search engine if you're into finding information on a vehicle. I happen to have worked on the thing from inception, and I got to tell you, it works quite well. If you haven't used it, stop by their booth and check out what this thing can do.
Yeah, now just a few housekeeping items before I turn G loose on today's topic of diagnosing those catchy 420, 430 codes. If you're online watching on the Search Auto Parts motorage.com website, there's a comment section right underneath the player that you can offer your comments and suggestions. But in the interest of time, G's got a lot of information to cover. We won't be able to take those questions unless we have time near the end of the presentation. For you guys here, if you have a question, please raise your hand. And again, we will try to accommodate as many as possible. Of course, G and I will be available right after the event to talk to you guys one-on-one if you want to wait till then. Okay, so without further ado, Mr. G. Truglia, it's all yours.
And we could always answer the people on the internet. You could always email us as usual.
Absolutely.
And we'll answer the questions.
Yep.
And since we have a lot of information here, I have to do it in a New York minute. For guys that don't understand my accent, I don't really have one. He'll do the translation for you.
No, see, it depends on where you're from in this country, right, of who has the accent. So.
That's right. What we'll be covering today, components involved with 420 and 430. The #1 code in the country. On the screen, the scan tool shows you there's 4 codes on this car. And you have to know where to go. And let's look at them. You have one that is an O2 heater code, one that is an EGR code, and one 420, 430. So bank 1 and bank 2. Where would you start your diagnosis? You would need to know where to go first, correct? Well, what's going to make a 420 or 430? The first place we should go here is where? The heater code, right? First place we should go. Okay, now, catalytic converters, as you know, we put hydrocarbons and air into the engine, the 19 to 21% oxygen that is in this air that we're breathing, goes in, and of course we break it down. What comes out is byproducts of the combustion process, right? And we try to break it down. The catalytic converter is the last thing that breaks down any emission. So it's important that the sensors are working good, and obviously the catalytic converter is good. You could look at different things and think, I took a couple of pictures here of a brand new catalytic converter. The substrate you can see looks nice and clean. A bad one up top, you say, why is that one bad? Well, of course, we tested it. This thing had 180,000 miles on it, okay? And this one also had 180,000 miles on it, the front converter. And you can see the one that says it's good up top, the old looking one, that thing still was very efficient. It was just the second cat that really took a hit. Now this must have been, maybe it was replaced at one time. I don't know, I got the car afterwards. So sometimes by looking at it, you may not be able to tell if it's good or bad. We got to test and not guess, right? Something that you should know, in my state, and of course in California, you have numbers on a catalytic converter. You have to make sure you replace the converter with a CARB certified cat. Now, in the old days when we did tailpipe testing, and out here I know you don't do that, okay? You don't do an OBD2 test. But a tailpipe test is totally different when they certify the car when it's new. The FTP, the Federal Test Procedure, is something that they use to turn that mill light on, right? And that mill light is going to say if you're good or you're bad. It's really going to get you in the butt. So putting on a part You took a converter off that was this big, you put one on that's that big, you may have a problem, right? And especially when we're dealing with a lot of the Asian cars, your Toyotas, your Subarus, okay, your Nissans. These are the tough cars to keep that light off. And remember, the light should not be on, just like when a car was new, the light wasn't on, right? And I know a lot of places for years, God, don't worry about the light, the car still goes, right? Well, they're throwing money out the tailpipe and they're polluting the air that you and your family are breathing.
Gee, a quick question
Yes,
for
sir.
you. I know that, I don't know about you guys, but when I was first coming into business, the term universal had some rather negative connotations to it, right? I mean, it's like universally fit nothing and worked on nothing. Is that what you guys are usually seeing in the shop? But today I want to stress that the universal catalytic converter that a lot of manufacturers offer doesn't mean quite the same thing. You know, they're still certified to the car that they're being sold for. The universal only means is that they don't have the plug that you can cut it out and put the new piece in. Bottom line is, if you're getting your components from a good source, a known good source, you shouldn't have a problem whether it's something that you weld in or that you buy as OE fit.
So basically you'll get a piece like this that is a good converter, but all the components or pipes or flanges will be something that you add on.
Yeah, and there's a lot of shops that prefer to just weld that stuff right in.
And it's easier sometimes for your parts store rather than carrying a million different catalytic converters, right? There's hundreds and hundreds out there that they can carry a good substrate with different pipes to configure to a lot of cars. So that's something. So converters just don't fail on their own. They don't just wake up and go, hey, I'm going to die today, and give you a nightmare in your shop, right? There's something that has to kill them. And these are some of the things that are a problem: mechanical integrity, exhaust and intake leaks. And exhaust leaks people overlook. They know about the intake leaks. They forget about exhaust. Fuel trim or fuel control, very, very important. O2 and air-fuel ratio sensors. Remember, they're the guys checking, either controlling fuel or checking if the cat is good or bad. And of course, TSBs and reflash. And as I go through, of course we're limited on time, but as I go through, you can see some of these examples as I continue on. Oop. So, the top 10 causes. And again, you can look on MotorLogic and find all this same type of information. People forget about ignition timing. Well, we don't use timing lights anymore. But the timing chains wear, the timing belts move. Do we have problems with ignition stuff? Sure, timing is a major factor that you want to look at. Intake leaks. How do you find an intake leak? You're going to see, I'm going to go over some tools you need. ECT problems. So sensors that are given the wrong information, well, that changes fuel control, doesn't it? Oil contamination. Now, if you have a big nose like me, you can smell the dipstick and you know you got gas in it. If you have a normal nose, well, you got to take the stick out and take it to a safe place and maybe put a lighter under that. And if that thing starts to burn, you know you got a lot of gas in that oil. Very common, by the way, on European vehicles. You'll get a lot of gas in the oil.
Real quick, let me interject you on the oil contamination, guys. It's like now a lot of these converters are so good at cleaning up what we used to see is the smoke coming out of the tailpipe that you can have, and we've all seen, we all know some of the domestic models that burn oil like a freight train but don't smoke. And that's getting into that cat. So that's certainly a factor you want to consider, not totally eliminate just because there's no outward sign.
Correct. Injector problems, injectors, dripping injectors, injectors with poor spray pattern, fuel pressure. You know those regulators on Ford, they never stuck on you, right? Nah, that don't happen in the real world, right? And not to pick on Ford, but we know regulators go bad on all different manufacturers. Oxygen sensors and air-fuel ratio sensors. Are you checking them right? Did you get the right part? Are they working right? Are they lazy? Did we lose something on this? Right? I mean, I've come across a lot of different nightmares where people try to cut wires, put them together, put the wrong sensor in the car. Sensors don't have those little fins or slits on them. Why does the original one have 8 holes in it or 4 slits? And the one you're putting in has 3 slits or 2 holes. It does make a difference, gentlemen. Exhaust leaks or damage. And finding these exhaust leaks are important because that's going to change what those oxygen or air fuel sensors may look at, and that'll give you an issue with a 420, 430. Cylinder misfire. Now misfire, the word misfire, I think most people in our industry, when we hear the word misfire, boop, 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 ignition pops in your head, right? But it could be a lot of things. It could be fuel, it could be mechanical, correct? And the number one problem is engine mechanical problems. It's like if this roof was sagging, we don't start throwing a new roof on, we start with the foundation. And some of the things that we forgot is going back to the basics. Does this vehicle have a good engine? And I see this a lot. I do a lot of state emission programs where people will throw a new mass airflow sensor, new oxygen sensor. They're trying to throw all these parts at the car, but they got a mechanical problem. This is such a huge problem out there that a few manufacturers that we'll get to in a second, in their scan tool, have put in the ability to do relative compression, to check to see if that cylinder is good or bad. Now, some people have the IDS or the TechStream or some other tools that are out there, but what happens if you don't? I'm going to show you that.
Yeah. Can I interject in 1 second, bud? I'm sorry, I could be jumping in.
Jump in.
This is the fun we have, and one of the reasons it's so much fun doing these things live. I think all of the things that G had on his list, all 10 kind of have one thing in common, don't they? They all affect the quality of the feed gases getting to that converter. You know, that's really the whole job for the PCM, isn't it? To make sure that those feed gases stay in a very narrow range, and when they get out of that range, what's going to happen to the converter? It's going to get overheated, and then all kinds of bad things happen. So they all have one thing in common. What's going in has got to be in that very narrow, acceptable range for it to handle.
No doubt. Now here's one of the problem cars I kind of spoke to you about, an aging car, Subaru. How many of you guys have done Subarus on catalytic converters on Subaru? Quite a bit. Now, sometimes you got an RTFB. You got to look to see if there's a TSB on this thing, correct? If you don't look for it, you're going to run into a problem. So here, reprogramming. If you don't do reprogramming, well, how do you know you got a problem? How about if you threw a new converter at this and you still had the problem, the customer gets fed up after you called the parts store 3 times, okay? And guess what? They go back to the dealer or to another shop, and that shop says, hey, here's a TSB for reprogramming. They reprogram it, the problem goes away. You're going to have to give them their money back, right? And you're going to lose a customer most likely. So we always need to look. Are there TSBs on this? You'll see a couple of more examples that I'll give you. Here's another one on a Toyota. And you know what the Siennas, these go bad all the time. But what kills the cat? We're going to talk a lot about fuel trim. Because if fuel trim is off, that's what's really going to do these things in, correct? And we need to take a look at all these different things that can cause it. Some of the other components here, whether it be bad gaskets, some of the old poppet valve on the Vortex motors, fuel pressure regulator on the bottom, bad coils, bad boots. How many guys replace these boots right here? The lower left-hand corner of the screen. People don't look at them. BMW gives it to you nice and hard. If you don't replace those boots on a regular basis, remember the driving machine, well, it's going to burn out not just the coil, it's going to burn the driver, and guess where the driver is? In the $1,200 plus PCM. And yes, you need to program it, and you got to change the coils and boots anyway. So you need to look at it. You need to look at all of those different components there. Well, let's look at the top left-hand corner. How many of you guys have replaced that oxygen sensor of that type of style? How many times there's a problem there where that is not seating correctly? And you go, I can't see it from where I live. That little leak ain't going to matter. It's going to matter, correct? Or little cracks around a regular oxygen sensor. Mass airflow sensors. You know you've never come across a mass airflow sensor problem, right? Of course you have. But you need to know how to check them and see if they're good or bad. Sometimes computer problems. Cam and crank type sensors. Anything that causes fuel control issues. Here we can see different manifold problems, or me smoking that Toyota. You see the exhaust gas, the smoke coming out? Well, that would be an exhaust leak right over there, right? So if you have a smoke machine, you're going to need to check for leaks in these exhaust systems. Under the shield. Just had one come in from one of my students, guys like yourselves, come in one night last week, and he had a problem. Sure as hell, under the shield, he had a crack in the manifold. And this is common on a lot of these Asian vehicles with the covers. Okay? So look for that stuff. Different tools to use. Now, you need an arsenal of tools. Of course, the scan tool is always the first thing you want to jump for, but let's stop there. You can use things like laptop scan tools. We'll talk about thermal imaging. I got some good new case studies I finished up recently. Pressure transducers, smoke machines, EMS gas analyzer, whatever, you got to pick your poison. But you need equipment so you can test properly, right? If you don't test properly and start guessing, you're going to throw parts at the vehicle and never fix the problem. This is a thermal imager. I'm using the general thermal imager here, and you go, what in the world is that going? Well, I'm going to explain to you. The hotter the color, the whiter the color, the hotter the catalytic converter. So what you're looking at here is one to the left of the screen is just a picture so you can see what I'm looking at, the catalytic converter. The one to the right, you notice that converter is just starting to get some different color. You see the red, the bluish is the colder area. The pointer where I have it at is 237 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, it's not really super hot yet, is it? Okay. Now here's a real hot converter on the bottom. You see this one here? That's a bad catalytic converter. And you'll see a case study later on. That is a cat that is already hot, but it's not doing its job. So thermal imaging is another way to look to see if we got a problem. Relative compression. This is very, very important because if you don't own a Ford IDS, how many guys have a Ford IDS in here? Oh, good. Toyota touchscreen. Well, you know you can do relative compression right from the tool. Toolbox on the IDS, piece of cake, probably the nicest tool out there. But even using an old tool like this, the Fluke 98, okay, we could see a bar graph, and you know how long that takes me? Less than 2 minutes. I disable fuel, I'm at the battery positive negative. I tell the guy in the car, dude, crank it over. I crank it over, and 1, 2, 3, I could see if I have a problem. Let's say you don't have this scope. Pete and I have done the Pico scope on one of the things, and Bernie scope as well. Well, you can see on the other side, the right side of the screen, I coupled my lab scope to AC voltage, and you see the little humps? What I'm looking for is either a space or higher hump, something like the odd man out. In other words, something that looks odd, correct? And that's a way to find it. You'll see a couple more examples coming up. Here's Pico. When I first crank it over, first the little hump for 0 amps, the little hump at about 50 amps, because each line going up is 100 amps. I get up to about 400 or so amps on the initial crank. And then you can see the little humps on the bottom at approximately about 160, 150 amps. But they're even. If they weren't even, I got a cylinder problem. What cylinder? Well, it depends how much the guy wants to pay me to find out what cylinder it is. I would have to take the other channel of the lab scope, and then if it's a 4-cylinder, put it on, or any motor, but we'll use a 4-cylinder, put it on number 1 ignition, and then it's 1342, and I could see what cylinder the problem is. And then you can do your regular compression test, wet, dry, do a cylinder leak down test. The bottom line is, you're not going to throw parts at the car because it ain't going to make a difference. You got a mechanical problem, right? And throwing a new converter on, it ain't going to work.
Well, it will, but it's not going to work for very long.
Well, but you see, now we have the U-suck light. The U-suck light is the check engine light. And that is going to kill you because it's going to say you didn't do your job. If this is a gas tailpipe test, you're going to get by for a while, and the guy's going to come back in a year, and you're going to tell him, oh, you need a cat. Oh, you did that last year. Got to give him a new cat? Come on. You got to fix the car. Here's the IDS. Okay? Nice and simple. They give you the firing order, and all you had to do is go up the toolbox, click it, crank it over. A minute or so, you're done in no time. This is a little different, but this is the Toyota tech screen. Same thing. They give you RPMs. You see the straight line? If one of those cylinders were bad, I would have a glitch on it. And it's easy to pick out. Why are these companies putting it in their scan tool? I'm going to tell you why. Because they got a lot of parts that were returned defective, okay, and they weren't defective. The technicians weren't doing their job. So they try to even get their own people in their dealerships to utilize this information.
Yeah, that's where I'm going to put a little side note there for you, partner, because it's like, yeah, that's a very good point. All the webinars that we've done so far, we've always had some connection with some of the larger OEM and aftermarket engineers that build this stuff. And once we ask them, what kind of reasons are you getting for parts returns? And 9 times out of 10, it's because of something that was not done properly in the field. So I just want to stress here that you guys are not the ones that are guilty of it, because you're here. And those of you who are watching, you know, are getting the training and continuing education that you know you need to stay successful in this field. But there's a whole lot more others out there that we still got to get to. So
yeah, no doubt. And if you don't update, Pete, you evaporate. In this business, it's real easy to evaporate quickly, right? Technology just keeps moving. You can do a power balance test right away, just like we did on the old scopes, the old ignition scopes. What cylinder's dropping out? We can do relative fuel injection flow to see if an injector's down, or you can take your regular fuel tester and do it manually per cylinder and see the drop off. Do we have an injector problem? These are tests you got to run. Here we can use a gas analyzer. You know, the thing that no one likes to use anymore? Gas analyzers are important. Just one thing in this whole gas analyzer right away. Lambda is something that you should look at instantly. And how long does it take you if you throw it in the tailpipe? You're there. You can see if you got a problem. Okay. So here on a Hyundai, there's a little piece I made up. Okay, that little rubber hose, I got my gas analyzer. I'm going into where the air fuel wide range sensor is. I don't care if I'm not in fuel control anymore. You know why? I'm seeing what the exhaust readings there and what are the cats doing at the tailpipe. Okay, so there is a pre-cat, there is a post-cat. Look at the difference of those readings drastically, so apparently this one is good. Just some gas readings that you can look at what range you'd like to be in. But again, the big one I would look at is lambda. Usually lambda of about 0.9798 in between is perfect stoichiometry, 14.701. If you're running real good there, you got a pretty damn good running engine. Okay. Anything over 1 is not rich, it's lean. Anything under is the opposite way, obviously. Here's a great tool from EMS. They actually have, I have 2 probes with that gas analyzer. One I stick up front, the other one I put in the tailpipe. The software does all the information for you. It'll give you all that stuff. I believe, yeah, John's here on the floor if you want to stop by and see him. Great websites. Information is important, correct? Well, these are some other resources like Identifix, like IATN, like NASPF for the OE websites on one stop. Google, okay? Sometimes when I say Google to different states, they come at me and go, you can't put that crap there, until I prove to them that if I pop a code in there, sometimes I get better information there than I do in other places, okay? Then my trading company, and of course, TST.
Wait a minute, dude.
Oh, and hold it. Oh, this guy.
There's no motorage.com up there. What's up with that?
I don't know.
We didn't have space on the slide, but of course, if you haven't checked it out, guys, we have a YouTube channel where you can find a ton of resources similar to all the webinars and training videos that we've done in the past. You know, G has mentioned things like relative compression testing, in-cylinder. All of that's available for you to view at your leisure online on the YouTube channel or in the AutoPro workshop, our online community at motorage.com.
Excellent. And check out all the different videos on both of our channels. We got a bunch of stuff. Okay, fuel trim. This is an important thing. And because of the amount of time we have, I can't get deep into it, but you should all know fuel trim. What are the numbers you look for? Basically, if you're at a 10 range, you're going to run into problems. You need to look at fuel trim very, very carefully. If you guys, on the IDS, what does Ford tell you for mass airflow sensor? You guys ever do the contamination test? They get right in to show you fuel trim instantly. You know why? It's the most important thing that's either going to kill the cat or let the cat survive, right? So fuel trim is very, very important. Okay? And here's some of the numbers. When I have a problem car, I don't go by 10, I start looking at 6. But that means I have problems in other areas. If you're over 10, plus 10 or minus 10 is a command to take fuel away, doesn't necessarily mean fuel is being taken away. What do I mean by that? Well, if I got a bad pressure regulator, I can -10, -20 all day long, but that pressure regulator is mechanical, correct? And it's just going to dump fuel in there, and you're not going to stop it with the computers. Does that make sense? So we need to look at fuel trim, very, very important. Mode 6. To understand Mode 6, I'm going to give you a crash course, very simple. You all know what a DTC is. Too late at that point, you already have a diagnostic trouble code, because it's really a problem. What comes before a DTC? A pending DTC, right? Now, most state emission programs, it doesn't matter, it doesn't fail for that. It matters, gentlemen, because why? If it matures enough, it's going to go into a full-blown DTC. And it may prevent monitors from running. And you guys that don't have emission programs, you're worrying about what monitors are, you don't care about them. Monitors are important. A monitor, if it's ready, is going to give you a code. If it's not ready, you got an issue somewhere. And it's not checking your work real well. So you should always look to see if your monitors are ready. Now, before that pending code, here's where Mode 6 comes in. Mode 6 is not all that hard to understand. It's not new. It's been around for years. Even if you had the old OTC monitor 2,000 years back, they had Mode 6 stuff in there. People didn't know what the hell they were looking at, but it was there. It is a bunch of tests that the computer is continuously running. If it fails enough time in Mode 6, it elevates to a pending code, fails a couple of times in pending, goes to a DTC. So you can see how important it is. It'll predict if that O2 or air fuel is failing, or maybe your cat is going to a different place that you don't want it to go to.
I heard a great way to describe Mode 6. Great way.
Good.
When you were in school and you took your tests in school and the teacher handed them out, you knew right away if you passed or failed, didn't you? Okay, well, that's the mill light. The mill light tells you something on the car has passed or failed. But if you wanted to improve your test scores, you would go back to that test. You'd like to know which specific questions that you had a problem with, wouldn't you? Well, that's Mode 6. Those are all the questions that the computer is asking, all the tests it's performing to decide whether that code's criteria is met or failed. And you can go into Mode 6 and see which one of those elements is not doing what it's supposed to do, the area that you need to study on. Is it something used every day? No, but it's one of those little things that you have in your back pocket. It's one more bullet in your gun belt for chasing down a diagnostic problem if you need it. And thankfully today, most of the OEM or any of the OEM service information systems have great Mode 6 sections that help you decode it, understand what the tests are. Back in the old days, we had to go do the math and break out the calculators and do a lot of research. And all that's a lot more available to you today than it used to be.
Yeah. And it's very helpful. The example we have here on Toyota, well, you can see we have bank 1 and bank 2 on a cat. The test value, the minimum and the maximum, well, what you need to look at is, number 1, what's the test value? And that's that pinkish looking box. That means this is the last time it ran the test. This is the results that came up, the little quiz they're giving you in school. The minimum is saying if you get under this minimum, you're in trouble. If you go over the maximum, you're in trouble, okay? So in this case, I want you to look at this and make a judgment call. If we look at this, what would you say about bank 1? It's damn good, isn't it? But how about bank 2? Well, it's close, right? Now, I got to warn you on Mode 6. Okay. So here's this cop car. Has a 3.8 on it with a 420. You can see here any graphing tool happens just to be ECTS. You notice the yellow is the front O2 sensor. Well, that's pretty damn good. It's going up and down. We like that. And that seems to be the problem here, okay? It also to the efficiency of what that cat is. It's only 29% efficient. Now, why am I doing this? Before I replace something, I want to make sure that the part is either good or bad, okay? So looking at it, I don't even need a calculator. Could I do this on my Snap-on, my OTC, my lawn? Number. That's the only thing that's a little different. Looking at the cat that came out of this car, Mode 6 also agrees with this. They'll tell you yellow's caution, red it fails. This is 1.46. 2 slides back on Mode 6, I told you Society of Automotive Engineers, SAE, said anything more than 1 is a failure when it comes to mode 6 on a Cat. Okay. Okay, so now these motors have a lot of different problems, don't they? Okay. We know there's gasket leaks, there's hose leaks in the back, vacuum boosters sometimes go. I mean, a fleet of police cars that I worked on, the PCV valve that's near the alternator there, how many people put the wrong PCV valve in? The wrong flow is going to let your fuel trim go, or they leave the O-ring off, it's going to go bye-bye. In this case, one of the things we looked at is fuel trim on this car is a plus 17. Okay? Now, that is a biggie. Now, that's long-term fuel trim. Short-term is also high, but here's the way to tell if you're on the right track. Is this a problem happening at idle, or is this a problem that's happening off idle? So what do you do to check if it's a vacuum leak problem? You race it up to 2,500 RPMs, you look at short-term fuel trim. If short-term starts dropping down and you see 1 notch go down on long-term, hello, you're in the right ballpark, you got a vacuum leak, right? It's not all that hard when you understand what you're looking at, okay? And these cars idle a lot. They're police cars in New York City, and of course after 9/11, they idle all the time. Winter, summer, don't matter, they're always running. Here's a Nissan Xterra that came in. One of my students came by one night, he said, I have a problem, G, you got to help me out with this car. I'm on the 2nd catalytic converter in it. And the second one is from Nissan, the first one was from a parts store. Okay? And he threw some parts at this car. He could not get the monitor to run on this thing. It came in with a 420. What he didn't look at when he told me he went to other sources to find stuff, and I said to him, did you look at TSBs? And he gave me, I said, well, dude, yes or no? Well, he gave me one of those again, and I had to reprogram this car, because look what the problem was. The problem was this thing needed to be reprogrammed. Now, if you don't program, you're going to either have to get into it, find a mobile tech, or do whatever you need to do, because if you hang a converter, not saying it didn't need it, but now we can't get the monitor to run, and in my state, you need to get that monitor running. It has to be ready, or you're not passing the inspection. Now you're going to have a cranky customer, and that's not doing the job completely. Does that make sense? Okay. So reprogram is important. Here's a case study by Bernie Thompson. This vehicle came in with a 420. Listen to the customer's complaint. They had low power and low fuel mileage. What comes to your head instantly? Got a claw cat, right? Okay. So you want to test it. Well, he put stuff up here. The monitors are okay. You got 1 DTC. You look at the freeze frame, not a lot of information on this, but he has the 420. You look at the fuel trim. Now looking at this, and by the way, all of you guys should have the Bosch handbook. I call it the Automotive Bible. You can get it from SAE.org. You look in there and you'll see mapping of a fuel system. Bernie has taken fuel trim, short and long term, and blocked it out for you, so rather than seeing the 1 number on your scan tool, or if it's 2 banks, 2 numbers, you're seeing the whole kit and caboodle here. Notice that RPM in the left-hand box with the green, I'm between 500, 1,000, 1,500 RPMs. I'm in the green at 2. Is that good? Yeah, I don't have a vacuum leak, do I? I start moving up. I notice the numbers are elevating all the way through, but they're pretty steady, okay? Well, we all know how the engine works. We need to take air in, and we need to get exhaust out, right? If we can't get it out, we got a problem. We look at the catalytic converter at idle. Some manufacturers like GM have done different things. They test it at idle. Some of them test it at 30 some odd miles an hour going down the road, whatever the criteria is. But what would you say about this catalytic converter right here, right now? Forget about the number. What do you see with the graph if you had your other scan tool? It's mimicking the front. And I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. That's steady idle, okay? Now look at the mass airflow sensor. Now why do you want to do that? Well, this could indicate we have a problem or a problem in exhaust or the mass airflow sensor. One of the PIDs that you always like to look at, and you don't need a fancy scan tool, you need to look at calculated load. Some cars may have near 0 at idle, some may have 20 at idle, see what it is, load this thing up, and what you want to do is see that get to about 90% or better. Bernie also gives you, as you can see, to calculate it based on the engine size, based on the altitude where you're at and the temperature. The red is where this car should be going. You see the graph with the two little humps? Are they going anywhere near the red? No way. So this tells me I have a problem either pulling air in or getting something out. Well, in this case, we know we had the power complaint problem, right? Didn't the customer tell us that? We had low power? This had a clogged catalytic converter, as you can see. Look at the difference. And a lot of you guys now have video scopes. You'll see a couple other ones, like one I took on a Volkswagen. You go down and you can see inside by taking either O2s or air fuels out, looking at the substrate to see how clogged up or how broken up it actually is.
I got to ask, G, it's interesting. We always use the term clog, Cat. What's it clogged with? Or is that clogged, or is that actually those little individual cells trying to melt down on each other?
Some of it is melting down, and some of it, depending if it's burning oil or whatever,
sure,
some ash and so on, but they do melt. They sinter big time. I've had some I took out, they look like just a ball that someone just crushed together.
So, I mean, and I'm just a, average guy, I guess. But it seems to me that if I had a catalytic converter code complaint,
you could have one.
One of the things I might want to do right at the bat is to get my little camera in there and take a look at what that substrate looks like. I mean, because if it looked like that, well, that didn't happen on its own. That's not old age. Something caused that, right?
You bet. Now, I'll give you another one. This here, the matting of a converter is very important, okay? Now, what happens, I'll give you an example on a BMW on their 8-cylinder cars that they had. You go down the road, and if you don't give it a pedal to the metal and drive, it'll be okay. You hit it hard, what happens, the matting, and these were OE cats, the matting from the manufacturer wasn't really good. It started breaking apart. The cat twisted sideways, can't get through the substrate, and now this car's going, it's dying down. You let your foot off on it, it has good days and bad days. So sometimes shaking the cat, with your rubber mallet, not the BFH, the big freaking hammer, if it wasn't broken, it'll be broken after that, right? We're talking a rubber mallet, give it some taps, you see it banging around, the matting's probably gone, inside is probably toast.
That's probably a good point to mention here too, guys. How many of you guys know that some of these converters to get the new ones require break-in?
Anybody very important.
Know about that? Because I know about me as a tech, when I got the part in the box, I took the part out of the box, whatever was in the box, stayed in the box, and ended up in the trash can. But usually there's some kind of thing called instruction sheet in there that tells you, yes, this particular model does require break-in, and what that is, the matting that G just shows you has to be heated, expands, and gets that substrate in there nice and tight. If you don't do that, then that's going to be banging around, breaking up, and next thing you know, you have a comeback on a brand new cat. It wasn't the cat's fault.
That is correct. So here's this Jetta that came in, 72,000 miles on today's vehicle is relatively low, isn't it? It's low mileage. It has a bunch of codes from a CAT code, an oxygen sensor code, 3 misfires. We need to address the misfires first, right? Had a bad ECT, well, fixed low temperature definitely would kill the cat because these German cars like dumping. Also, since I'm on Volkswagen Audi, these have a lot of problems with the air injection systems on them, don't they? The little rubber hose, that hose, the vacuum hose breaks, rather than letting the air shoot out to the atmosphere, or under the hood, I should say, what's it doing? It's blowing upstream all the time. Lean condition, rich command, you pull that dipstick out, man, you got gas in that oil big time. A lot of the fix is, fix the hose first. If you get the cat in time, drain the oil and filter, and drive this thing, and you'll notice your code will go away. Sometimes if it's too far gone, not only do you need the sensor, you're going to need the cat. In this case, it's a little different. Basically, fuel trim was good on his car, but look at that cat. Look at that substrate. There's only a little part right in the middle. Look at the side. It's all starting to melt together. Well, thank God this thing was covered under a TSB, okay? So under a TSB, this customer winded up getting a new cat for absolutely zero, okay? And the shop took care of the misfire problems that it obviously needed. So that would do it. This Toyota here came in with 420, And sometimes this guy had some information on mode 6. And I'm going to tell you something about mode 6 that's important. You notice there's something in the upper right-hand corner, read all mode 6 once or read continuous. Mode 6 being read once means it's a snapshot, like me taking a picture of you right now, and it stays frozen in time. Mode 6 can update itself as you're driving down the road, as sometimes in your shop, but most of the time it's driving down the road to meet a certain criteria. This is updated information that would be coming in and being displayed on your scan tool. So I always like to pick that. You can see that oxygen storage, okay, fails. It has a maximum limit to the upper right-hand corner of 0.998. The red box is telling you it's a failure. It's 1.037. So it's failing. You know that 420 is legitimate, correct? We have something on the bottom. The thermostat monitor is giving us a yellow, something to look at. We're close to the temperature that it doesn't like for the thermostat monitor. Why do I bring that up? If we have a cooler running motor, could that make a difference down the road? Sure. We got to keep an eye on that. Okay. Now, you know, word that said oxygen. The guy who worked on this car, when he saw that, guess what he did? He replaced the air fuel sensor on his car, no lie. He called up the parts store. Of course, they didn't have it. He had to go to the dealer at the time. And they understood his lingo, oxygen sensor meaning an air fuel ratio sensor. So they sent it out to him. He put it in, and of course it didn't work. Okay. He got the same results. Now, the other thing we like doing, and he didn't match the car up, went in generic. I didn't pick Toyota when I went into a shop. And I just did this because I do training programs and I'm curious. Notice there's no red box up top. The yellow on the bottom we had on the previous screen is yellow here. Notice it's not defined telling me what anything is, correct? Now, why do I put this in here? Because you're going to see on the next slide here, when you do pick the right number, it says catalyst deterioration, not oxygen storage, which really is similar, but the engine group was not the same engine group that the guy should have picked. You know, they put those big letters on Toyota, right? So you can pick the right thing. So why do I bring this up? Well, some of your mode 6 information that your scan tool may have, maybe it's not accurate, okay? Maybe you need to look it up, like Pete said, in an information system to make sure you got the right info, okay? So this car here, the fix on this thing was basically doing a fuel system cleaning. Here's another quick case study. This is my accountant's car. You can see his CPA plate, and it's quite a few years back. Okay, so the screenshots I'm going to show you from the scan tool are older, but it brings a point up. We have here information that I have a failure. And make a long story short, I was waiting. It was a Saturday afternoon. My accountant was supposed to come over and get my paperwork, and he said, "I'm going to be late, G. I gotta go to the Infinity dealer." What are you going to the Infinity dealer for? "Oh, my light's on. They turn it off for me all the time." I said, "Alan, what are you doing?" "What do you mean they got to turn it off all the time?" I said, and he was almost there. I said, "Okay, when you come back, let me see the car." So he comes back, I get this, and this was before OTC was decoding on an Infinity. Notice it doesn't tell me what this is. It just tells me it's a failure. I had to buy this information from Nissan Infinity, and you could see decoding this. I have a P0420, I have an 02H and an 81H. I don't see anything with an H there. I didn't know what the hell H meant until I did a little reading, right? Well, there's no component 81, okay? It says component 81. You see the red highlight box? Do you see 81 up there? It says component 01. So right away you start thinking, well, that scan tool manufacturer must have made a mistake. Stop! You need to look a little further, and you'll see the next slide when I did look a little further after looking at this. And by the way, that Saturday I paid my money, and at the time I was on the NASTF. I headed the training committee, and then I was also the co-chair at one point. And I paid them on a Saturday. I didn't get this information until Tuesday. Okay, I put a complaint in. They got mad at me after that, but I put a complaint in. And I'm looking at this carefully, I'm reading through this whole thing, that's where I found H. Now this is all the Mode 6 data for this manufacturer on that car. There's not another drop. Catalyst, O2, O2 heater, that's it. There's nothing else. There's not another page. That's it for this year car back then. Nowadays, we get a bunch of information, correct? So it's all real important stuff. Now, here's another screen. 0101, you see it did fail. The maximum limit's 100 on 118. And guess what? That's the correct information. 0101 is a 420. So even though they cleared his code, I knew Mode 6 did its check. And I said, you got a catalytic converter code, and you know what? You're pretty close to 80,000 miles, and back then that was the rule in our state, okay? They're gonna bang you later on for a new converter. So I gave him all the information. I had him drive around for a few more days. He came back, his monitor was ready. He had the 420. You can see the information here. It happened at 50 miles an hour. There's his fuel trimmed up and out of whack. I start looking TSBs up, and if you worked on Nissan, you know number one, Nissan Infinity, tons of reprogramming. Number two, they had problems with changing O2 sensors on these cars, okay? You can see they gave them a new cat, new O2 sensors, a tune-up, the whole bit, and at first, when I gave him everything you just seen here, he went back to the dealer, and you know what they first said to him? Oh, your mechanic doesn't have a clue what he's doing. You need the factory tool. So I knew they were going to say that to him, and I said, well, here's Holly Puglisi's number from EPA. And by the way, tell them to look at their inspection machine. In the state of New York, my training program is on every single machine, okay? And here's the guy from DMV you're going to be calling. They gave him all the stuff for free, waxed his car, gave him a whole bunch of stuff, dinner for him and his wife, because they did overkill. But what happens to the normal guy, right? So you need to back your work up. A Nissan, the difference with this 420 is I have a knock sensor code. Very common on Nissans, right? Well, some guys like to cut the wires, clear the code out and go, I hope nothing happens. Well, the newer cars, you can't do the wire cutting trick anymore because the light will be on. You need to fix the problem. And if there's a knock sensor problem, remember the top 10? Number 10 was timing. Does the knock sensor have anything to do with timing? Is that going to do something to that cat? You bet. So there's the information, and fuel trim is not too crazy, a -8, nothing nutty on long term. There's on Mode 6, a little bit different on this Mode 6. We have a minimum and a maximum reading. You're getting two different readings. Depending on the manufacturer, they may look at one, they may look at something in between, they may look at a min and a max. So there it is. Looking at it, 42%. Look at the oxygen sensor, the red line. It's going steady at first, then what happens? Drops like a rock, and it starts to do what? It starts to mimic the front O2. So we can see a new knock sensor, new cat, fixed that car. Here's a Nissan that came in, another 420 on it. Again, you can see Mode 6 failed. These do have problems with the shielding. Now here's another issue. You know a manufacturer is cheap. They ain't putting shielding on for the hell of it, right? Sometimes it keeps a pipe hot, it keeps a cat warm, whatever the case may be. Sometimes there's nice cracks or exhaust leaks right up top. It's a good way to use a smoke machine and see if you have anything coming out, right? Well, there was no exhaust leaks on this car. It was hunky-dory. Something simple. Here's the launch die gun, okay? Air-fuel ratio sensor, the bottom part of that screen, what do you see? Pretty much a straight line at about 1.47 volts or so, 1.5 volts, which is normal range, with one exception, one little anomaly there, about 4 boxes in, but that line is straight. It's in fuel control, isn't it? But look at the rear O2. Right away, you know you got a bad cat, correct? Because you can't mimic it. And again, I want you to use your tool graphing. If you use your tool graphing, it's easier to pick this stuff up. Now, this is a buddy who's actually here. I don't think he's in the room. But Dave, who runs a Volvo shop in Albuquerque, New Mexico, had this vehicle come in. He got a P0133, which is an O2 sensor code. Now you notice I have there, this equals a CAT code, and you go, what the hell is this idiot talking about? Well, bear with me because you're going to see how this happens on a couple of different car lines. Guys put in a new O2 sensor front and rear, and of course it didn't fix the problem. There's the 133. They fixed this problem, it comes up with the 420. So maybe it did need an O2 sensor, but you know why this 420 came up? When Dave looked at this car carefully and seen that it needed to be reprogrammed, right after following the manufacturer information and reprogramming it, now you got a 420. How do you explain that to a customer unless you do your research and find this out? Honda also has a gig like this. Not on all their cars, but on a car line. Okay? So you need to look at stuff carefully. Information is king. That's the name of the game. So, new CAT. Another one, a 420 here. This one, 420, 50% load, 186 degrees, fuel trim, not that crazy. 72 miles an hour is when this set it. Now, you all heard the federal test procedure that goes out 41 minutes, 19 seconds. Usually you think it only goes to 65 miles an hour. Well, the extended FTP goes up to 75 miles an hour. This guy was doing 72, and consistently his light would come on. The fix for this car was reprogramming, okay? I used my Master Tech with that and a fuel system cleaning. And that car is still going. Here we got a 420 and 430. And we can see, there's the 420 first. We have fuel trim, long-term 7% and 10%. That's up there, correct? And if you got both banks, you see my both banks now? Look at one that's at 61%, one's at 36%. It's a Ford. Where are you going to go? What do you think could be the problem? Look at this. Tell me what the problem is. Remember, you see these boxes of fuel trim? Anything on the bottom that's high is usually a vacuum leak if everything else is green. Anything in the middle that follows through to the end is usually a sensor problem. Anything that's green from the bottom to the middle but you just have it up top, that's usually a fuel pump type of problem or fuel delivery problem. So now that I got sensor type of problem, right away it's a Ford. Both banks, I have what? A mass airflow sensor problem. Okay? And we could see we're not meeting the volumetric efficiency of this vehicle. The fix was just cleaning it. Go into advance or whatever you deal with, get some CRC mass airflow sensor cleaner or Joe Schmo brand, whatever it is, or some alcohol, clean it up, and guess what? You can put this back. If you feel more comfortable buying a new part, knock your socks off. And don't forget to check the air filter. How many bad air filters do you come across where you take them out, the rubber on the end of it's all mushy, it's letting leaves in and dirt in there? Make sure you got a quality filter in there. And there's the after. So look at that. You see the yellow about meeting the red? It worked just fine. Okay. This one happened at 61 miles an hour. And I just got to speed this up. What do we got? Okay. I'm blind. Just yell it out. Oh, I'm going to move quick because I want them to see this other stuff. So now this one actually passed. Look at the limits. Look at the limits. They're tight. 0.253 test value, max 0.30. Not a big one like you've seen from Toyota before, 0.998. Each different car line or computer, they could change stuff. Also, how many of you guys look at these numbers when you reprogram? Do you ever notice that these numbers may stretch a little bit? That's how they may keep the light off, okay? So here, this thing actually was passing on the last test it took. That doesn't mean it's okay. Notice I don't have continuous checked. Okay, so does it pass or fail? Well, it's passing right now, but it's borderline. Hey, doesn't it pass at idle? What did I tell you? But look at the rear O2 in the back. Do you like that? We not only want to check at idle, the point I want to bring here, what happens when I bring the RPM up? It's starting to mimic the rear, right? Cleaning it up, we come back to a very, very low reading. Fuel new coils, and a front O2, this car was on its way without a problem. So it's not always a cat, okay? People always think you got to throw a cat at it. You need to do fuel system cleaning. You need to do thorough investigation. Our friends from Toyota, I love the little thumb up. You see the little thumb up on the bottom? You see the question marks? You see their little chart? This is their mode 6, green and red with the little tick or upside down triangle. That's the last test it did. But thumbs up tells me that that system passed, but you see what I have highlighted is the cat. You see the little glass and the question mark? That tells me it did not pass all the way. It passed the last test. That's why you're seeing the green, but it will not complete the monitor. So it needs to do what? More mode 6 testing. To pass in mode 6 once or twice or whatever, you have to be an engineer to know how many times it needs to pass. If you pass enough, then you get the thumbs up. That's where the monitor is ready. If you see this where you have a question mark, there may be still an issue in that area. That's where mode 6 comes in handy. Here's another quick tip. This comes off a Saab paper. Saab had something to help clean up their catalytic converters, check the fluids are good, warm the vehicle up, check the front and rear O2, make sure the post O2 is good as well. Remove and ground one spark plug wire. What do you think you're doing? You're loading the cat up big time, right? Run the engine 25 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, not 10, 15, okay? Don't want to melt anything up, don't want a smoke show, smoking rugs in the dude's car. 2 to 3 minutes, go check it and see what's what, okay? Sometimes erasing DTCs reset all the monitors, obviously, all the time, I should say. Sometimes if you read the enabling criteria, you may not want to erase it and just drive the car in the criteria for that particular monitor, meaning the cat monitor.
Yeah, just a real quick note there. I don't know if any guys want to comment. I first saw this and Jay shared this with me. What does that sound familiar with, especially diesel guys? DPF regeneration, maybe?
That's exactly.
So if you're getting a car, let's say, I would think is burning oil, you know, it's going to start adding that soot to the substrate in the converter. So yeah, I would see where that would make sense. If we can find a way to clean that soot out of the system and give it the opportunity to do what it's supposed to do.
Heat it up enough to get it going.
I want to put a word of caution here that some of the exhaust manufacturers that we spoke with want to caution us with real quick. When you do the carbon cleaning, especially in like some of these GDI engines, you got to be careful of where those chunks of carbon are going, because you could create a situation where you're going to lead to a cat failure if you're dealing with a heavily carboned up, you know, an engine's got a lot of miles on it, hasn't been maintained. You could be setting the stage for that problem.
No doubt. Okay, so this one has probably got some 5-gas readings. Always look at 5-gas, the big one they told you right there. Oxygen is also important. When I have an oxygen level, you should know that cars, if you look back in the beginning, the original oxygen reading I told you should be definitely under 0.5%. We're at 1 point something. That means I got a misfire in this motor big time, okay? We see lambda is high, it's way over 1. You got an issue. So we got stuff to back it up. Another one at idle. Monitors are set. So this is with the code. At idle, 46. At a high RPM, this is with the monitor set. Monitors not set. Idle. Hey, that looks pretty good. But watch what happens. Race it up, it failed. So sometimes monitors set, monitors not set really make a difference. Okay? So that's another thing that you could look at. Mode 6 tells us it was a failure as well. Look at this cat. Pretty busted up, pretty bad, right? And then the guy had the nerve to bring that thing in. Okay? Look at the difference in the OE to this one. And this is before what we talked about before, the new type of cats. This was an inexpensive cat he bought on the internet. And of course it didn't keep his light off, okay, or even take care of any of his problems. So be careful, use the right thing. This one here, the article should be coming out in Motor Age probably in a couple of months, whenever Pete gets through with it. I finished it up and submitted it. Basically, we got a Mazda with a 3-liter with a 421. So some companies sometimes change the 420 to 421, 431. We're not going to go through all that. You can see here, even using a different scan tool, there's the 421 for the example on the Autel unit. Went back to Bernie's tool. Look at the other bank. You notice one bank is 93% efficient. Look at the rear O2, the turquoise line, nice and straight, right? Look at the other side, the first bank that we got the 421 for, mimicking it, okay? Relative compression, well, we got a little more, we almost got 20% problem there. This came from another shop. They dump parts in the car, coils and stuff. You read the story, you'll see what I'm talking about in a couple of months. This guy has a mechanical problem, just like the roof that's sagging. I'm not going to throw a new roof on if the foundation is no good. So right away, bingo, I got a mechanical problem. Now, I used the thermal imager. And you may be going, what's the deal with this thermal imager? This is bank one where we got the code. I want you to look at it. The whiter the color means the cat is working. This is at idle. It did cool down a little bit, but these things are dead as a doornail. There's not much going on here. Look at the difference in the area on the other side. One at idle, one when I started racing it up a bit, or someone I had up in the car. Look at the difference of the one that didn't have the code to the one that does. Okay? Thermal imaging is a good quick look. This is not a temperature gun. This is actually a thermal picture of what's going on in there. So the other thing I want you to be aware of, many of you shop owners don't do this. This is a federal law. I don't care if you don't have an emission program. This is a federal law. The pink must stay attached to the converter for 15 days. Doesn't matter that Bob wants to come by and give you 30 bucks for that used converter. Don't do it until 15 days goes by. Okay? The customer has to get one, and you got to retain that copy for 6 months. There's the EPA ruling paper. Okay? You can notice one that was done recently. There is the paper in the cat that stays there for 15 days. Make sure you do that. Here's one from Mark McKean up in Massachusetts, one of our TST members. He got this in from another shop. Now, you see the red arrow. What do you notice is wrong with this? One of those welding shops, you know, the exhaust specialist, put something in wrong here, didn't they? Okay. That's a technician not doing their job right. Okay. TSBs, we're almost done. Now here's Toyota. You're not going to fix this 420 on this Toyota. You can use the tech stream or use a J2534, go to their site. It gives you all the warnings here, and by the way, don't forget to pull that fuse. There are warnings besides put a maintainer on. If you don't do that, okay, if you don't read stuff, you may be burning the dude's computer out. You go with the tech stream, you can see the calibration code needs to be updated. The upper right-hand corner says yes near calibration. And this is just a step going through, make a long story short. It tells me, and you see the thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Look at the thumb down. What's that for? Catalyst efficiency. Now remember a few slides back we had the question mark? It hadn't failed yet and got the thumb down. Okay? So they have a real nice setup there. Going through, it takes the ID of what you're doing, tells you, do this. You know, a lot of guys are afraid of reprogramming. It's a piece of cake. There's some classes here on it. It walks you through. This is not hard. It was harder to change a memcal or a prom in the old days than it is to do this. So it's just walking through to save some time here. You can see after I programmed it, no more yes says no. Now you notice it says pass, but I have a question mark. Why? Because you got to drive the car and it has to pass mode 6. What? Multiple times before I get a thumbs up. Okay? So this is, I like using this in my mode 6 class, which I can do for 6-8 hours, okay? I like doing that because guys get a visual of this more so than just the numbers. It works real well. So with that being said, I will entertain some questions because in a New York Minute, I have a couple of minutes left. Any questions, gentlemen? No questions? Come on.
There's one way in the back there.
Okay.
So the question is, you know, have you seen a lot of catalytic failures based on fuel quality, especially with alcohol content, correct? That's, okay.
Hey, I'm in New York. We got, no, okay. The fuel sometimes is an issue. You know, obviously, I have seen some people make mistakes and put E85 in. There's certain places that that is available. Fuel trim numbers go crazy, but I can't say I've seen a real bunch of failures with them. But I know they do happen. Other questions?
You talked about fuel system cleaning and stuff. Have you run into any issues where the different types of cleaners the person uses?
Good question.
The question
Here's
is-
where I'm going to get myself in trouble.
Here's the question, is that, again, on fuel system cleaning, is there an issue with different types of cleaners? That's like politically
Do I really have to
correct,
answer? Yes. The question I'm going to say is yes. You know, the old days when we used to put water down, water cleaning, and I've done some stuff with Chevron Texaco, which make the Techron stuff, pouring water down is a great way to clean carbon out. But you can't do that anymore. Why? We will ruin the air, fuel, or oxygen sensors. We will probably clog up that substrate in that catalytic converter big time, and possibly even crack it because we're putting water down in there. Now, the different type of chemicals. You know, some people like seeing a lot of smoke come out of the back right away. When that does that, yes, it's doing a great job cleaning, but what do you think it's really doing? It's taking those big chunks off big time. They're going past your O2 or your air fuel. They're banging into that substrate, and now you got a problem. Okay? I don't want to get into recommending brands. I'll do that off the air because I get myself in trouble. But there are different ones that I would suggest and other ones that I would stay away from. So you want something that does it slowly rather than here's a quick fix. I see people ruin O2. And by the way, when you do a cleaning on any car, make sure you check for codes and pending codes before you do it. Why? When you're using this cleaning stuff, you're going to set codes. And you need to know if there was anything else there prior to you doing it. So always do that. And I hope by now most of you are all printing, or at least take your camera out and take a picture of it if you don't print. Okay? Good question. Any other questions?
Well, I think we're going to have to get narrow time. We can't hold you up for your next class.
Yes.
So,
I gotta
guys,
get to
thanks so
class.
much for coming out and joining us this afternoon. Thanks to the folks at
Thank you.
Advance for sponsoring today's webinar. And